everyone. We're back for another episode of Growth Colony, where we talk to B2B marketers about their paths, focusing on success, but uncovering where things haven't always gone right so you can make better, more informed decisions in your own B2B marketing journey. Today, we're joined by Morgs, the Morganatron, Morganimus Maximus, or as we all know her as, Morgan Wilkinson. Morgan is an accomplished marketing manager with a unique background that spans hospo, office management, and marketing. Early in her career, Morgan developed a deep passion for creating memorable experiences. This passion allowed her to work closely with internal sales and delivery teams, as well as partners and customers, leading her to find her place of purpose in a marketing capacity at Logicalis, Australia. Morgan brings a unique perspective to the industry as she leverages her background in hospitality to craft campaigns that not only engage customers, but also foster positive interactions and support for her internal team, external partners, and customers alike. And it's a pleasure to have her. Morgan, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you for having me.
No problem. How was that for an intro?
I like it. It was good.
Excellent. I practiced that one a few times. No, I'm only joking. Yeah, well, we got there and now you're here. Fantastic. We're going to be talking to you today about some things. I particularly like your background because you're the first B2B marketer that I've spoken to, not just on the pod, but in general. You're the first B2B marketer that I've met and spoken to that comes from a background in hospitality. Why is that intriguing? I find that really intriguing. Not only is it because you're the first person that I know that has come from that background, but I really do think that if you think about the hospitality industry, it is B2C at scale. You are talking directly to direct to consumer in a multitude of different, to a multitude of different. In person, it's mass B2C marketing and sales.
Very, very much so. Yeah.
Isn't it? And everyone's a decision maker.
That's one of the biggest things that is a huge differentiator there is every single person you speak to has the power to, at any stage, sort of change their mind in that decision process. And it's very either or sometimes.
Everyone in that journey has the power to change their decision, the power to buy.
And the power to influence others quite drastically in their decision-making process as well.
The word of mouth on that is crazy.
Yeah.
And so that's what I found really quite interesting about now that you're a B2B marketer. I want to dig in. I want to take some time today to find out how the operating in the hospitality industry and coming over to a B2B marketing piece has influenced your approach to B2B marketing. So how would you say your hospo background has given you a little superpower in becoming a marketer? What can our audience of B2B marketers from mid-level to senior learn broadly about what you bring to the table?
I think the biggest one is really around, obviously the fluffy term for it is stakeholder management, stakeholder engagement, but just around the power of a one-on-one connection with people and how that can then build out to at-scale influence. So specifically, as we've said, when you are in the hospitality industry and you've got that in-person one-on-one connection with the guest, the person checking into your hotel, the person sitting down for a meal at your restaurant, it's very much you have a direct level of influence with them. You're selling direct to them, and their experience will then really have a ripple effect out both during and after their time with you. And at that same scale, it does have that same ripple effect in the B2B world. So the way you interact with internal stakeholders like your sales team, I'm in an IT managed services provider at the moment. So our delivery team, our managed services team, things like that, that has that ripple effect out to the customers that we work with, the people that we partner with in our vendor landscape. And that ripple effect influenced by your one-on-one connections really does sort of butterfly effect out, and it can make or break a lot of your marketing activities and a lot of your levels of engagement and influence there.
I wonder if you can expand on that a little bit more for our listeners and for me, just being selfish, but with regards to something specific that's happened in your current role where you can exactly pinpoint that this situation that's unraveling in front of your eyes in the role that you're in right now, what is something that's happened where you have been intrinsically been able to link back to, I learnt this when being in hospitality, and this isn't a conventional approach necessarily for B2B marketing?
Absolutely. One of the biggest things that I learned early on in my hospitality career was that in those sort of direct interactions and a lot of the customer interactions that we had throughout my hotel days, one of the first things one of my managers told me was a lot of the customer escalations and the complaint escalations, every time it sort of rolled up to where we were at that interim manager level, a lot of those, angry customers and very adversarial customers were really motivated by not anger, but actually fear. They had a worse outcome that this situation was contributing to, and that was the biggest motivator for their state of mind, their way of behavior, and also for what would actually help in that situation. From the hospitality side, I'll give an example. We had a guy who checked into the hotel that I was a duty manager at the time. He checked in, seemed flustered, busy, but, just in a rush, nothing dramatic. Went up to his room, came back down a minute later and was furious, absolutely furious, because his key card wasn't working on the door. And he was shouting and screaming and swearing after a minute. And we were like, whoa, this is a very big jump in behavior.
And sorry, what position were you in? What was your role as this thing was happening?
So I was duty manager at the time. So when my receptionist checked them in and then he came back down, the escalation up to the manager was the escalation to me at the time. So I was brought in to solve the problem.
Of this guy, come down, he's shouting, he's in reception, he's in the foyer.
Yeah, which is obviously very damaging to the experience of the rest of the guests trying to check in at the time.
Yeah.
Not a good sign for us.
Isn't that a good tone? No.
No, not exactly. So obviously, first step is we get maintenance up to take a look at the door and find out why it's not working. But while all this is happening, I was speaking to him and I said, can I ask, is there, you seem really, really keen to get into your room, get back out. Where are you off to after this? You seem very passionate about it. And he goes, yeah, I've got a job interview after this. My suit, my tie, everything like that is all in the room. And I am going to be late to a job interview if I can't get into this room. So in his mind, it's a pretty big deal, which is very fair. We managed to get the door open. He got inside, realized he'd left his tie at home. So he's now here, running late, already stressed, doesn't have time to do much about it. All weird had happened from our end is that the door battery had died on the electronic lock. It's a little bit out of our control. All we can do is fix it as soon as possible, which we did. But he's had his whole afternoon ruined. He's stressed. He thinks he's going to be running late. He doesn't have the tie he thought he had. And that was a bit of a tipping point for him. So our assistant hotel manager at the time, who I reported to when I said, look, we've got this going on outside at the moment, he went, we can help with one thing for sure. And he opens his desk drawer, grabs out a spare tie that he keeps in his office in the hotel, went outside and said, look, I know you haven't got a tie at the moment. You're going to a job interview. Would you like to borrow this one so that you can feel put together, professional, ready for the interview?
And who was this that was giving the tie?
So this was my assistant hotel manager, so the one I reported up to, who actually was the first one who said a lot of it stems from that place of fear of that worst outcome.
So you've handled it up until this point. You've got him in the room. You've got him dressed, but ultimately He's rushing out the door. He's not got a tie. He's thinking,
he's still feeling unprepared.
Could have gotten into the room, in the first place, I would have been able to identify that I needed a tie to begin with.
I would have had time to grab one.
Whatever, right? So now he's stood outside, waiting for a taxi or something?
Yeah. So he's thinking, I could have had time to go out. I could have grabbed a tie on my way through, but this has thrown off my whole afternoon. He's waiting for the taxi outside when my manager goes out and says, look, mate, completely understand. This is a really awful way for you to be going into an interview. You must be feeling really stressed. Can I offer a tie so that you at least feel like you've got that little bit of polish and you're together? And that was a huge turning point in the interaction with that guest. He came back afterwards and he was like, thank you so much. It was just a little point of reassurance that made him feel like he's back on track. It's continuing as it was supposed to from there. The guest came and stayed with us about a month later because he was looking for an apartment in the city because he'd gotten the job.
I thought you were going to say he was coming back because he was looking for a tie.
Yeah. He was like, you might know where I can find one.
So he got the job. And so a month later, he ends up staying with you again.
While he is apartment hunting, because he was, after getting the job, needed to then move into town. So he ended up coming back to stay with us.
Repeat business.
Exactly. A little bit of loyalty there. So that sort of interaction where it was not about dealing with whatever was happening at the time, but actually digging a little deeper and finding out that motivation and what in this case, his worst case scenario was, has informed a lot around how I motivate the people that I work with and get them through any areas of, conflict or disagreement or anything like that. And thinking of a more marketing specific example, obviously we are on such a podcast. We have a few events that we run internally, so customer-facing marketing events. We had one a while back that was the start of our focus group series that we run. They've been quite successful. We now have 4 different focus groups that we run quarterly sessions with. It's a really influential series. We get a lot of really unique insights from our customers that we wouldn't usually have a chance to get. Obviously, it's a lot of one-on-one FaceTime, well, not one-on-one, but quite intimate FaceTime events. It's building quite a community for our customers as well, which has been wonderful. But we had a little bit of trouble just getting it off the ground at first because a lot of our sellers were sort of like, this is a big time sink for my customers. I can't guarantee that the content's always going to be suited to them. I won't personally be attending the events. Only like at this point, our national sales director was the face of the events. So the sellers were like, well, if I'm not there with my customers, knowing what they're being talked to about, it's a little bit unsure for me. I can't guarantee quality, relevance, etc. And it really came down to looking at that same thing. Well, what's their best case outcome? What is the worst case outcome? So we know what to give some reassurance around, show how we're going to avoid anything like that. And it was being able to frame the conversation in a way to say, look, we know what you guys would want out of this, which is an increased level of influence with your customers, an increased level of engagement and buy-in and more like interaction from them with our wider team. And also like, we get it. You don't want a series of invitations going out that aren't relevant. You don't want to damage your reputation with your customers in that way. And so being able to frame it as both, we understand what motivates you positively, and we also know what motivates you negatively and how to avoid that has been a huge game changer.
So what you've just done there is that you've taken a story from back in your hospo days and applied some of that thinking to now being in B2B marketing. Right? Your customer in the hotel, for example, the one without the tie, the one without the working key card, is now being seen possibly as your counterparts internally. So whether it be your members of your sales organization or your engineering team or device team, what you're saying there is that by digging a little bit deeper, you can understand where this worst outcome is stemming from if you sense it within your team.
Yeah. And I think it also translates across to our like the B2B customer as well, being able to say, because at the end of the day, they're making decisions that are for the best outcome of their business, but it's still their job on the line. It's the results are going to be reflective of themselves, their reputation, their standing within the organization, within their network and things like that. So even in that case, there's still definitely, you can take into account what the possible worst case outcomes might be for your customers when you're designing a campaign. Work that into the messaging to say, here's all the things we can help you avoid, we can help you conquer, we can help you learn from and develop from and be better than. And it's hugely motivating in that way as well.
So then, is this something that you carry around with you, this little superpower that you've got? Is it something that you carry around with you throughout all of your conversations? Or is there like a specific trigger that happens that when you see it, you kind of find yourself kicking into that action? So I suppose the reason for my question is this might be the first time for some of our listeners to be hearing something like this. Maybe the more seasoned might have this skill set in their tool belt. But for some people, for sure, this is going to be the first time. And some people for the first time, or some people that have heard it before, might be thinking, that's interesting. That's something I could steal. Firstly, is it something that you are born with, or is it something that you can learn to sense and pick up?
I think it's definitely something you can learn to sense and pick up. Some people, we'll call them empaths, might be quite attuned to that sort of thing and quite used to seeing where someone may be in a conversation uncomfortable with something, and they can pick that up as a little bit of a red flag that there's something on a deeper level that's impacting how they're viewing, your interaction, the decision in front of them, their way of thinking, anything like that. But I think it's definitely something you can sort of learn and develop. And when I was in hospitality again, one of the things I used to say to my receptionists when they were trying to deal with some of the customers that might have a complaint and things, as I said, when you hear someone that's coming back at you with a complaint or some sort of resistance, it often helps to, it sounds simple, but just stop and let them talk through whatever their concerns, their complaints, their issues are. Because a lot of the time they'll end up telling you if you just give them a second to sort of talk through their thoughts and their opinions. From the point of view of my current role, if we've got a campaign coming up or an activity coming up and we need some buy-in internally, if there's any pushback, sales will be like, we've got a ton of other things on, we don't have time to prioritize this, we don't have time to do that, or any of the usual sort of initial pushbacks you might get. A lot of the time, giving them a second to talk through their reasoning behind it, you can really easily address all of their concerns and all of what the worst case outcomes might be based on what they literally tell you out loud. So often if you're looking for a way to find what the motivator is, letting them talk is often the best way to find that trigger point that you can start to base your responses and your interactions from.
You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in that order.
For a reason. Yeah, exactly. Very much that.
Yeah. And so this is interesting because it's not exactly... This is a skill, this is a superpower that can be used both internally, externally for identifying the worst case scenario when you as an operator, as the marketer, or anyone in the organization, when you have something that you need to arrive at and there are blockers that are kind of coming up against you from the team that you need buy-in from.
Yeah.
And these blockers that you're getting, these resistors, it's friction. And what you're saying is that at times where that's happening and you find yourself in sometimes an impossible position because you have to get to the next step as the marketer, as the project manager, as the whoever it might be. And there are these blockers getting in the way. What you're essentially saying is that you're going to get resistance, you're going to get friction, not all the time, but if you do,
sometimes, yeah.
One of the more effective ways of navigating through that friction is to allow the person to speak their mind. And it's ultimately keeping quiet, letting them say their piece, and being able to understand, okay, I can understand the problem that they're facing. Let's try and sort that out so we can get over this hump.
Definitely. And you'll often find as well, there can often be areas in which their feedback, like a lot of the time, a lot of us marketers are lucky enough to work in organizations with some pretty smart people. Like a lot of the time, once they get through explaining their viewpoint and their reasoning and the external factors that you as the marketer might not actually be aware of yet, it can actually have a really positive impact on what you're trying to achieve, because you've now come out of this conversation and this interaction with a whole new level of understanding and information that can be really useful
to make your end result ultimately better.
Exactly. Yeah.
Have we just let the cat out the bag?
Too much of a life hack too early on.
Have we just blown your cover with your entire organization when they see or hear this episode?
I think at this point they're all pretty used to me. I'm 5 years in.
Reading their minds.
Yeah, they know how I operate. They're like, we know not to tell you too much now.
Psychic morphs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you've got this. Okay. So look. So you've got this nifty little tool. It is a great negotiation tactic. I don't know if you used to work for the FBI or what.
That's what front office felt like sometimes.
That's what front office
hostage negotiation.
Like. Could Because in my intro to you, in my intro at the beginning of this, I also touched on that you had a career in office management. Was that before or after hospo?
That was after hospo. I'd been working in hospitality for about 10 years at that stage. I'd started my career with a degree in hospitality and tourism management from a school in New Zealand. Came across to Australia and I'd been working on the beautiful Hamilton Island up on the Great Barrier Reef. I was a housekeeper up there. I was very bad at it. Very short-lived career there. And then shifted into Melbourne where I worked for a hotel chain in a few different areas there. I worked from food and beverage manager, logistics manager, assistant front office manager for a short time, ran a conference and events department there. And then COVID hit and not many conference and events were happening in the corporate Melbourne scene for a while there, which is actually how I found myself with the team at Logicalis. I was looking for something else at the time, a new challenge, a new opportunity. Wound up finding the office management role with the Logicalis Australia team there. And there was a lot of overlap, coordination, logistics, stakeholder management, all that sort of thing. So I was like, perfect. And once I joined, we ended up being locked down for a lot longer than anyone sort of anticipated at the time. And so I was like, I'm doing about half a day's actual work in a week. And while I would love to just coast by on that, I'm getting a little bit bored. So does any other departments need help? And the marketing team were like, yes, please, absolutely. They were doing, webinars and customer mail outs and, online events, virtual customer roundtables, things like this. And so I was like, perfect. And got stuck in, and then it was just so fun. I had a great time. I was like, this is fantastic.
This was your first sort of tenure into marketing. You sort of dipped your toe, and
Yeah.
COVID was the reason.
The reason behind it.
The reason behind it.
Yeah, and unusual motivator, we will call it. But yeah, I had absolutely no background in marketing, no experience, no formal training or anything. But obviously, as we always say, you learn on the job, and it was very much the case for this one. I've had some wonderful mentors, some wonderful leaders that I've learned a lot from over the past few years.
Yeah,
which is how we've sort of gotten to where we are today.
Yeah. Well, you sound and look like a marketer. You could have fooled me.
I'm sneaky like that.
All these psychic tricks you have.
Exactly. I just read your mind. I was like, he wants someone who knows what they're talking about.
Yeah. Oh, look, I mean, a lot of marketing, especially when you get into the promotion and the messaging of things, a lot of it that's more sophisticated generally tends to lean on the psychology of what is this person or people or organization of people going to be thinking, and what is it that we can do to address that. After asking your questions. So, it's a nice transition, and it seems as though that it's a place for you. So kudos to you, and kudos even further for making your way across and taking advantage of COVID for everything that it was worth. Look at that.
Yeah. Got to make the most out of things.
Absolutely. I think I now have your secret, and I hope that our listeners take heed of these words, because albeit so simple, it is something that if you simply do listen to, you're going to come up against friction and resistance, and not in a negative way, just in the daily throes of being in business and having to work with other people. And it's a nice reminder that simply by listening and allowing people to air their thoughts, you can ultimately, if you know what it is that you're talking about, of course, if you know your endpoint and what it is that you're trying to achieve, you are able to then hear them out and overcome those hurdles right there and then, and move it to the next step. And it all comes from listening and looking out for the potential worst outcome in that other person's world.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. Morgan, I've got a couple of rapid fire questions for you.
Hit me.
What's one resource, book, blog, podcast, talk, etc., that fundamentally changed the way you work or live?
When I was quite young, actually, still a kid living at home, my mother did a course on boundaries by, I believe his name is Dr. Henry Cloud and John Townsend from memory. I might have to double check the exact name distribution. But basically, it talked about how you can only be responsible for your own, they called it the FAB, feelings, attitude, and behavior. And you can only be responsible for your own FAB. You cannot control how other people feel, what their attitudes are, what their behaviors are. And the book that they released, again, it's been so long since I've actually read it, but it was very, very sort of foundational for me as I started growing up and entering the workforce, because I'm not a hugely confrontational person. So if there was any sort of real friction, I say I'm non-confrontational and everyone laughs because I wound up as a duty manager for several years dealing with the most confrontation possible in a workplace such as a hotel. But the book was just all about how you can identify what is within your sphere of influence, your own feelings, attitudes, and behaviors versus what other people are going to feel, how they behave, what their attitude towards you and the external world is, and about how to recognize and set your own boundaries, both personally and professionally, to ensure that you're accountable for your own FAB and respectful of other people's. And it was actually really foundational as I was first entering the workforce in how I interacted with others, what I expected of others, and what I expected of myself.
Yeah, interesting. I've not heard of that before. It makes a lot of sense. FAB, feelings, attitudes, and behaviors. You cannot control what other people think or feel about you or about anything. All you can do is control how you think and feel about the certain things that you think and feel about. The sort of slight angle that I take on that is more around the sense, and this is a daily thing that I try to do, which is I try to remember that it would be selfish of me. It would be selfish of me to think it would be selfish of me to allow anyone but myself, to allow them to make me feel anything other than what I should be in control of. So
that's very good one.
Very much keeping control of what it is that you feel and not giving that luxury off to someone else to make you feel because of what someone has done or said. So very much in line with that thinking. If you could give one piece of advice to B2B marketers, what would it be?
I mean, we've kind of covered it off, but just to listen, both in, your own workplace and the people that you interact with, the stakeholders that you, leverage and work with throughout your campaigns and your activities and your day-to-day work, but also to your customers. We've had so many wonderful events where a passing chat with a customer has formed the foundation of an entire campaign for us. And off the back of that, actually, my other biggest piece of advice would be to include yourself in those events. Don't let it just be, for example, our customer focus groups. It would be very easy to have, a couple of our sales leaders in there. We brief them, they go in, they host the event, they come out and everything. We don't have a focus group at the moment without one of our marketing team attending in person. So building the connections with the customers ourselves, it's made it so much easier now to get instant customer buy-in for any other activities. We've run a wonderful series, a video interview series called the Game Changers episodes recently, where we've been able to reach out to customers directly, really influential customers, CIOs, heads of IT, whole 9 yards, and say, look, we've loved talking to you personally. We'd love to interview you as part of the series that we've got coming up. It's skipped so many steps in terms of, you go to the head of sales and they say, talk to this account executive. You talk to the account executive, they say, I'll have a think about it. And then 3 months passes and you're like, do you remember when you said you would have a think about? It's you just have so much more influence and so much more connection with your customers. And it's really a huge benefit.
Agreed. Who are the influencers that you follow in the marketing space? Based on that same sort of
obviously.
Huh?
You, obviously.
Me?
No,
now.
I'm already on the podcast. Chill.
Yeah.
No, I think I'm still very much starting to just find a lot of these sort of marketing influencers in the wider marketing sphere, both for B2B and B2C in general here in Australia and internationally. But one of the biggest ones I found has been connecting with a lot of my fellow B2B marketers here in Australia. Obviously, you're aware of the Generate B2B marketing community. That's been a big game changer. Yeah, I'll get my cash under the table later. But no, just having a quite grassroots style community where it's not over-managed or over-produced, but just provides a chance for connection with other people in the industry. And on a platform where you can share so much in terms of, ask questions, ask for feedback, give your own ideas, and learned things along the way has been a really, really big help for me, especially as someone without that formal sort of marketing education background.
Yeah. So look, you are a rare gem in the B2B marketing world, right? You come at it from a completely different perspective. From my point of view, you've got a handful of different experiences, especially the office management side of things too. So I'm really interested to hear your answer on this question, which is, what's something that excites you about B2B marketing today?
I think one of the biggest ones would probably be the ripple effect of what we then help our customers achieve. So, for example, the Game Changers interview series that we're running at the moment, one of the people that we've interviewed recently is the head of ICT at a grammar school in Sydney. And his story about his progression from, growing up in council estates, moving through, the education system when it didn't work for him, when it did work for him, to where he's landed today. But also then looking at the sort of project that we had asked him to touch on within that interview series, which was an Azure migration project. And the way he spoke about the impact that project had on the school as a whole, the ripple effect of, it enabled the teachers to be able to connect more quickly. It enabled the students to have a better access to their learning materials, and a lot of little benefits to the end user for our customers. That's just so cool to be enabling. I'm used to, with the hospitality background, you interact with someone and you can help them have a wonderful experience, but it can be quite a one-by-one style process almost. But working in the B2B world, you've used the term earlier today, it's at scale. And it's so cool to see how these at-scale interactions that we have as marketers can have this huge ripple effect of a positive output on a long term.
The impact that a single act, albeit quite a heavy lift act, it's not like an easy thing to do. But if you can get your ducks in a row and deliver on a project or deliver on a piece of communication or an activation of some description, the amount of lives and people that you can impact positively in one fell swoop. I think I'd have to agree with you there. I'd have to agree with you. And my first taste of that was when I had my first gig at Publicis London, which is a global advertising agency with a London office. And I was the account manager, the account executive, the lowest rung on the ladder in terms of the client relationship management team. And the client was Europe's largest low-cost airline. I won't name any names, but I think you might know who that is. And
dots together, yeah.
Their whole thing was, getting bums on seats on the planes. And this is very much B2C, right? This is at scale, massive media budgets, advertising, newspapers, outdoor, TV, print, everything, right? And the first thing, the first sort of campaign that I worked on, I put together, a flying route from place A to destination B, right? And after I delivered that through the production piece, about a week later, I saw the thing that I worked on, that I helped put together, on the sides of buses, on outdoor ads, spoken about on radio. But the biggest one for me was, every evening in London, if you ever get the tube, you'd always be handed a copy of the Evening Standard for free. It's a newspaper, right? Evening Standard. And I met my mum in London because she was working in the city as well. So we would meet and get on the tube together to go home. I had a copy of the Evening Standard and we sat down on the tube, absolutely packed. It's rush hour. And there were everyone in front of us on the tube. Everyone had a copy of the Evening Standard, and about 10 people at the same time were all looking at the ad that I had put together. And it was a really proud moment because it was technically the first ad, and I was able to say to Mum, "Hey, look at this! I made that," which I didn't. I didn't make it, right? But I was responsible for delivering it, and that story reminds me of what you just said, which is a heavy lift and the amount of impact that you can have. We're talking about selling airline tickets, right, over here, as opposed to what it is that, you're talking about. But the same sort of synapses, the connections and whatnot. And so I totally I totally hear that. So much so that when we got home, we cut it out, laminated it, and put it on the fridge. So
I love it. Yeah.
we had an airline ad on the fridge for months.
A point of pride and cheap
Yeah,
flights.
point of pride. That's it. Morgan, it's been great seeing you. Been great speaking to you. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. It's been wonderful having you on and talking through from a different perspective what it is that B2B marketers across APAC, anywhere in fact, can use in their toolkit moving forward when they are finding themselves having to navigate through project management or deliveries of campaigns or activations. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been great to chat.
Today's episode of Growth Colony was produced by Liza Maywald and Alexander Hipwell. It was edited by Dave Samito with additional editing by Liza Maywald and music arrangement by Liza and Alexander. Special thanks to Tina Wabe, we couldn't make this show without you. This episode was hosted by Vinnie Romano. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to know more about Growth Colony, check out our newsletter and subscribe with the link in the pod description. Do you think you'd be a great guest or just interested in a chat? Send through an email at podcast@xgrowth.com.au. That's podcast@xgrowth.com.au. Or fill out the form in the description. That's all for now. We'll catch you next week right here on Growth Colony.